about the first commandment, because the entire nation is destroyed as a result of that. So Donald Trump just read a passage from the Bible in 2 Chronicles chapter 7, kind of the last half of that chapter, and it's actually kind of a prophetic warning of disaster upon the nation. And the way Trump read it was kind of very kind of strange, kind of cryptic and apocalyptic, you might say. I'll just read the last passage that he read, and then they will say, because they forsook Yahweh, the God of their fathers, who brought them out of the land of Egypt, and took hold of other gods and worshiped them. So the Israelites, and this happened, right? The Israelites took hold of other gods and worshiped them and served them. Therefore, he has brought all this calamity on them. So it's a warning not to do this, but they did this. And especially, it began with King Solomon. And this is all about King Solomon, actually. King Solomon dedicating the temple. So I find it interesting that the sitting president of the United States, and as we know, presidents have a long history of being members of secret societies or a lodge or a temple. For example, Freemasonry, they have a temple. The Freemasons love King Solomon and his friend King Hiram, builder, right? These guys were builder. They built a temple. Builder. And Trump is in the real estate business. He builds buildings and names them after himself. Solomon not only built a temple for God, but he built a palace for himself, almost equally opulent, and he built a palace for his wife. He also made a house like this hall for Pharaoh's daughter, right? Trump just happens to be doing a lot of reconstruction at the temple of the district of the goddess Columbia. The White House is a temple. Washington, D.C. is a temple complex. That's why he's building the Arch of Trump. So I've already made a connection with Trump and arrogant, prideful, boastful kings of the past, such as Emperor Nero, and before that Antiochus Epiphanes, and you could go all the way back to all kinds of kings. And now we're adding Solomon to the mix of extravagant, prideful. Now Solomon, he of course he had this wisdom, right? He was a great king, and he probably at the time was the richest and most powerful man on earth at the time, at least in the known world around the region, because even Egypt allowed him to marry the Pharaoh's daughter. Before that, Egypt never did that kind of stuff. But at this point in history, Egyptian power had declined a bit, and they kind of needed this alliance. Egypt needed King Solomon, and you could say King Solomon needed Egypt as well. But King Solomon became extremely wealthy. The empire, he built the Israelite empire, and it would have been a lasting, dominant empire in the region had he not turned away from Yahweh and started to worship other gods. So, when I was a kid, you hear all these things about King Solomon. He was the greatest king ever. He was a great man. He actually, he's actually a failure, in many ways, especially because he started to worship other gods. He built temples to other gods. All right, so let's go to 1 Kings. 1 Kings has a lot more detail. It's the same content here that Trump read is in more detail in the book of Kings. So we can now kind of add King Solomon to the mix of, you could say, influences on King Trump. And the United States president is a king and an emperor. It's the same thing, all right? Don't let this democracy narrative lead us astray. Do not cut a covenant with them. You shall not intermarry with them. Why? Because they will turn your sons away from following me, who is Yahweh, and they will serve other gods. Well, isn't that exactly what Solomon did? And he will quickly destroy you. And that's the passage that Trump read was a warning not to do this.